Hey everybody, welcome to the weekly video cast of Be the Bison, where we tell amazing stories about men and women going through the storm and what they did during it and how they came out afterwards. And I'm excited to have a good friend of mine, Larry Hartzog, with me this morning. Larry and I served together at church. I've known each other for quite some time. And I'm excited because not only are we friends, we do that kind of fellowship together, but he's also a serial entrepreneur for 50 years with retail, franchise organizations, and restaurants. And he did medical supplies for a while. And over the last 50 years, has been a pyrotechnic, and that's kind of his mainstay these days. So, hey, Larry, good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Good to
How'd I
see
do with the
you.
introduction? Okay.
That was perfect.
All right. Excellent. So, good to have you for the interview this morning, and let's jump into it. We talk about sometimes things in business, sometimes things in personal. So again, whatever you feel is appropriate, please share that. It's great to get these stories out. So, tell us a little bit about a storm that you encountered.
Well, it was probably 15 years ago, 14 years ago, something like that. I was working in the durable medical equipment and met my met someone there. Not right away, but later on, years later, she had been a customer of mine, and we got very close and started dating and pursuing each other for quite some time. Took our time about that, but at any rate, things were going real well. We knew that at some point we gotten to where we wanted to get married. We hadn't set a date or anything, but anyway, I happened to be out on a job and up in Dallas, as a matter of fact, and I got a phone call from her. It was on a Friday. I'll never forget. It was April 1st, April Fool's Day, and she told me that she had come home early because she had been doing some continuing education, and she came home early and knew that her son had skipped school and was ready to fuss at him, but anyway, found out that he had committed suicide. He had stayed home and gotten a shotgun and committed suicide, and she was the one that found him. And so, needless to say, there was a whole lot that followed from that. A lot of friends and pastor and so forth that came to her aid immediately while I was trying to get back home. And anyway, long story short, we struggled through that, through the process of the grief, doing the funeral. We finally got past all that, but within a few months, she finally had to call off the relationship, and
Wow.
yeah, it was just too much. She had two girls still at home, and she was just concerned for them, mental health and everything, and so.
What a heavy burden to bear.
Yeah, very much so. I tried for the longest. I tried everything I could possibly think of, including talking with my pastor and or the pastor there in Dripping Springs, and um, but nothing made a difference. It just wasn't going to work, and so finally, I just had to walk away from it, mainly because I just didn't have a choice. But at that point, this went on for a while, and I had read a book. I don't know if you've ever heard it or seen it, but Wild at Heart by
Yeah,
John
sure.
Eldridge.
Yeah.
And he talked about how that in times of need and problem and so forth and hardship that the Bible is full of examples of men going into the wilderness to be alone with the Lord and to meet the Lord there. And so I finally got that idea. I just almost became obsessed with it and decided to take a week off by myself to go to Big Bend National Park.
Yeah.
And
Hey, Larry, curious. So,
sure,
familiar with Eldridge, Wild at Heart, and he lives out in Colorado, and
right.
outdoors. I know you love outdoors as well. So,
I
Did
do.
did that kind of prompt you to like say, okay, here's maybe a way that I can address this, this really deep wound and suffering?
Well, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. That's
So
exactly
so what
right.
did what did you do
That
to get through the storm?
well, so and it would take a lot longer than we have today, but I went through a great deal of preparation, getting supplies, looking up what to do, and so forth. I mean, I've been camping, been with scouts, and my son was in scouts, so that wasn't new. But this was going into the wilderness for multiple days by myself, and this was pre-COVID, which means there was very few people. In fact, when I checked in with the park ranger, he said, "Well, there's only two other people here, so you're probably not going to cross anybody." And I said, "Well, that's okay with me.
That's what I
You're
want.
that's what I want." And he goes, "Well, you know what to do if there's bears, don't you?" I go, "Yep, yep, we're good there." So, but that was exactly what I wanted to do, and that's what I was looking for. The crazy part about this is that I prayed constantly about this, and was, like I say, really almost became obsessed with doing this. And when I got to the park, and I found a campsite where I was making a base camp, and I left that up while I backpacked up into the Jesus Mountains. And I had everything, 4 stops over 4 days, and but you have to take a gallon of water for every day. Anyway, this backpack was probably about 70 pounds, and I parked. Now this was I was about 61, and I parked in the parking lot, only car there, and I start hiking up on the trail. And I hadn't gone probably 10 minutes, and all of a sudden, this horrible realization came across that said, "You can't do this." I
Wow.
mean, I've got 13 miles to go. And, just I was going trying to get back to the South Rim, not all in one day, but at any rate, uh, hurried along. I came back to the car and took my pack off and almost started crying.
Mm.
I just, Lord, it really is.
Just
You've
wept, huh?
you've left me here, and this is where it's going to end after all this. I just, I tell you, that was probably one of the worst feelings I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
And I just finally sat there for about 15 minutes trying to decide what to do. And I finally put the pack back on and said, "I'll just see how far I can get. I may
Mm.
just get down the trail, I turn around, come back, but I'm going to just keep going." So I did. And I'd been going about 30, 45 minutes. And there was a little area where there was some benches where you could sit, and beautiful view. Anyway, I did
Right.
that. And within about 5 minutes, these two young men came by, and they were stopping there and kind of resting for a minute and getting a drink of water. And we started talking. And lo and behold, they were both Air Force from San Antonio, which is where I was living at the time. And I had done pyrotechnics every year for the 4th of July at Lackland. And so "Oh, yeah, we know that." And anyway, they finally left. And so I left. And about 20 minutes later, down the trail, they were standing there doing something. And I came upon them again, and uh, we started talking. They said, "Well, hey, you want to just hike with us?" And I said, "Well,
Mm.
yeah, that'd be great." I said, "But I'm going to probably have to stop a lot more times than you are." And they said, "Oh, that doesn't matter. We don't care. We don't care." And anyway, long story short, we ended up hiking all the way to the first stop, and I got almost up to the top and realized I hadn't even thought anymore about
Mm.
how to get through this.
Yeah.
I, I am convinced the Lord put those guys in my path and helped
Yeah.
me get up there.
Yeah.
And
You're Meshach and Shadrach, right?
yeah, exactly. And,
Wow.
they have reached out to me 10 years later, and one of them's a minister.
Wow.
And yeah, but even after we left when I made my first stop, they went on, and I didn't think I'd ever see them again. Well, finally, the next day, I said, "Well, can I keep going?" Because I was still only halfway. Can I keep going, or should I? This has been great. Maybe I should turn around. Well, anyway, I decided to go on. I make it all the way to the South Rim, set up my camp, go out to the rim where I'm looking and taking pictures and so forth, and I see something off about 20, 30 yards to my right, some movement in the trees, and I go over there and it's them. And so
Ah,
we end up spending the whole night there on the rim in the dark, watching the stars. And
nice.
yeah, it was really something. So that helped me the whole rest of the trip by myself,
Yeah.
where I really got to do what I was there for.
So a question for you.
Sure.
So, you had this desire to be kind of out there by yourself, but yet all of a sudden, sounds like these two nice young military Air Force guys,
Right.
one of the other three or so that are out there in the park, and
Yeah.
you got connected with them. And was that like a distraction from, what you were thinking, and maybe I can't make it, and they kind of lifted your spirits up? Is that kind of
Oh,
what
yeah,
happened?
absolutely. And that was the whole point, because we talked the whole way, and we had a lot of things in common being from San Antonio, and they wanted to know what I did, and we talked about that, and then I was, well, tell me about your story. Where are you guys from? What do you do? How are you friends? Blah blah blah, and I no longer was focusing on the difficulty of putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going uphill this whole time, and so yeah, it was a distraction,
So
but
distractions can be good.
distractions can be very good.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for sharing that. I can picture that, having been out that way myself before, how beautiful and vast the land is. And,
It's
I can
amazing.
imagine the visitors you were seeing. So what would be maybe one thing, from this really tragic, difficult situation going out into the wilderness, what would be like one thing you would want to leave behind for somebody that's listening to your story?
um you know I guess as much as anything, for me, it was certainly the lesson of, because I remember praying so much, and feeling like I wasn't getting an answer, and yet I really was. I was just being impatient, and of course we all know, we've been through that God works on His timetable, and this all certainly worked out for the best, because a year later, uh, without having talked to Roxanne at all, I finally reached out again, and we got together, and she was in a much better place. And a year later, we were married. And
Yeah.
so, and so, and that story itself has led to me to some great things with her. We actually went back later together to
To that
go on
place.
that same place, that same trip. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you'll have to ask her about that, because that's
I,
pretty, that's
I,
pretty funny.
Yeah, I will. But hey,
That was all good and funny, but anyway, yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that. What comes to mind, what I'm taking away from you is not necessarily my timing, but God sometimes, well, not sometimes,
God's
always,
timing. Yes.
has
Yeah.
better timing in mind, even though it's painful. We may not see it at that moment. So, hey, Larry, good to be with you. Thank you for sharing that story. I look forward to sharing with others.
Sure.
If you're listening to this, you want to hear more of Be the Bison, go to solidleaders.com/, Be the Bison. You can check out this and other stories about going through the storm. So, hey, Larry, blessings. Thank you for the time
Thank
this
you.
morning.
Thanks for having me. You
All
bet.
right.
Enjoyed it.
Well, you have an awesome rest of the day, and we'll talk soon.